Have you ever felt like your project is just a series of fires you have to put out with no real plan? Yeah, we've all been there. But what if I told you there was a framework that could turn all that chaos into control? Well, today we're diving into the master blueprint for making any project a success. So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about getting from chaos to control. Then we'll look at the blueprint for your project. We'll explore 3 different ways to get to the finish line, unpack the super important ideas of influence, cost, and kill points, and finally, we'll clear up the difference between a project and a product lifecycle.
All right, first up, from chaos to control. Let's really dig into why every single project, big or small, absolutely needs a roadmap if it's going to survive.
I mean, we've all had this feeling, right? The team is busy, everyone's putting in the hours, but you get this sinking feeling that you're just adrift. You know, like you're sailing a ship with no map, no compass, no destination. It's an incredibly common and, man, is it a frustrating place to be. And you know, this is what happens when you don't have that map. Deadlines start to feel more like suggestions. Budgets get bloated. And that feeling of controlled chaos, let's be real, sometimes it's just pure chaos. It just takes over everything. But what if you could kind of install an operating system for your project? Well, that's exactly what a project lifecycle is. It's a framework that's specifically designed to bring order, predictability, and a clear path forward right through the middle of all that mess. So let's build this thing out. Welcome to Section 2, your project's blueprint. We're going to break down the core pieces that make this whole framework actually work. Okay, so here's the formal definition. Now, the key phrase you really want to lock onto here is defined by the control needs of the organization. What does that mean? It means this isn't just some random list of steps. Nope. It's a structure that's deliberately created so that leadership has clear checkpoints to manage the project effectively. And every life cycle is built from these things, project phases. Just think of them as mini projects inside the big one. Each phase groups together a bunch of related work, and it always ends with a major tangible thing, a deliverable. It's basically how you eat an elephant, right? One manageable bite at a time. Let's make this real. For a typical IT project, you see this nice logical flow. You start with the concept, then you figure out all the requirements, you do your planning, you get to the actual development, you test the heck out of it, and finally you deploy it. See? Each step is its own distinct phase. But, and this is a big but, the life cycle is not one size fits all. Look at a process improvement project. The phases are totally different. You're not building software, you're redesigning a workflow. So you set goals, you map out the current as-is process, and then you design the future to-be process. It just goes to show how flexible this framework is.
And that adaptability, well, it leads us perfectly into our next section, 3 paths to completion. Because it's not just the phases themselves that can change, it's also how those phases connect to each other.
First up, you've got the classic, the sequential or waterfall model. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You have to 100% complete phase 1 before you can even think about starting phase 2. It's very rigid, it's very predictable, it's a straight line. Then there's the overlapping model, which people often call fast tracking. Here, you might actually start the next phase before the previous one is totally finished. This is all about one thing, speed. You're trying to compress the timeline and get to the finish line faster, even though it adds a little bit more risk. And finally, we have the iterative model. With this one, you can just forget about a straight line. Here, you're working in loops. You might design a little, build a little, and get feedback on a small piece of the final product, and then you repeat that cycle. That iteration, over and over again, making it better with each pass. All right, now we get to the absolute heart of all of this. Influence, cost, and kill points. This is the critical why behind the entire lifecycle structure. This is why it's not just a bunch of paperwork, but a seriously powerful tool for success. I just love this term because it's so brutally honest. At the end of a phase, you hit a formal review, and some companies actually call them kill points. It sounds dramatic, doesn't it? Well, that's because it is. So a kill point is basically a phase gate review. It's a formal go or no-go decision. Is the project still on track? Do we still even need this thing? Has the risk gotten too high? This is the moment where management can pull the plug before wasting any more money or time on something that's just not going to work. It's like a built-in safety. And it all boils down to this right here. Seriously, if you take one thing away from our chat today, make it this. Early in a project, stakeholder influence, your ability to make changes is at its absolute peak. And at the same time,
the cost of making those changes is super low. But late in the project, that relationship completely flips on its head. Your ability to influence the outcome is almost gone, but the cost to make that exact same change is now through the roof. This is why we plan.
Okay, for our final section, let's quickly clear up something that confuses a lot of people. The difference between a project lifecycle and a product lifecycle. They sound similar, but they operate on totally different scales.
Let's break it down really simply. Think of a project as a single chapter in a book. It has a very clear start and a very clear end. A product, on the other hand, is the entire book, from the day the author first has the idea all the way to the day it goes out of print. The product lifecycle is the whole story. And here's how they connect. A single product's life, like a smartphone, can have dozens of different project life cycles inside of it. There was a project to design it, a project to launch it, a separate project for every single software update, and probably a final project to retire it from the market. And that brings us to the main takeaway here. A project lifecycle isn't just some boring administrative task. It is your essential framework for turning chaos into control. It's the tool that gives you predictability when everything feels uncertain and ultimately gives you a much clearer path to success. So as we wrap up, I'll just leave you with this one question. Now that you have the blueprints to build a better project, what kind of roadmap are you going to choose for your next big thing? Will it be sequential, overlapping, or iterative?